morning, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Darryl. I'm a professor, lawyer, and associate dean here at Stetson University College of Law. We're honored to have all of you come to our campus, so welcome. We hope you enjoy your time here and get to see a little bit more of the campus. But right now, we know you're ready for a scintillating panel discussion this morning. I'm here to introduce the panel as well as give you words of greeting. I'm not going to take up too much time because I know we need to get right to the discussion. I'm going to introduce you and start at the far end and work my way around. At our far end, we have Attorney Kehoe. Attorney Kehoe is a shareholder in Greenberg, Tampa, Florida law firm. He has over 35 years of trial experience and has a national and international practice that focuses on representing individuals, corporations, and financial institutions. Greg Kehoe has worked for the U.S. Department of Justice as a prosecutor for over 20 years in the past and had postings in the U.S., Europe, Asia, and South America. And while serving as an assistant U.S. attorney, he was responsible for successfully processing and prosecuting a number of high-profile cases. Next to him, we have attorney Franziska Kues. Is that right? Franziska Kues. I'm sorry. Attorney Kues is from Germany and completed her first state examination at the University of Munster in Germany, where she specialized in international law. She's also a scholar of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which awards scholarships to students and graduates of exceptional academic achievement. During her studies in Germany, Attorney Kues also worked as a freelance journalist in online and print media. To my immediate left is Attorney Ahmad. Mess it up. Ahmad Yazkan.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. I'm getting better. I should know it by now. He's a former student of mine. He's a graduate of Stetson University and founding member of the and managing attorney of the Yazkan Law firm, which is an immigration and removal defense law firm that's based in St. Petersburg but has offices around the world, including Beirut, Abu Dhabi, and an affiliate office in Beijing, China. He's an avid advocate for his clients who he represents before the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice in removal proceedings. He has the unique perspective being a native of Beirut, Lebanon. We truly do have an international panel there from Lebanon, Attorney Kues from Germany, and we have my own faculty colleague here, Professor Nagle, who's originally from Colombia. Professor Nagle specializes in international law, transport, criminal law, human trafficking, and national security law. And prior to committing herself to full-time teaching, she had been a judge in Medellin, Colombia, served as a law clerk for the Supreme Court of Virginia, and has also worked as an undercover private investigator in LA and for Microsoft Corporation's Latin American copyright enforcement practice. So we have a wide swath of experience. We're sure that we're going to get a lot of great global input in terms of the conversation here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Nagle, who will serve as the moderator. Again, welcome. I hope you have a good time here at Stetson. Hopefully we'll see you again in the future.
Well, welcome to Stetson and to Florida. My goodness, this is for tall people. I'm just so sure. Okay. It is a pleasure to have you all here. Yeah, it's on the record. Yes, everything I said is on the record. It's okay. It's okay to just record and just. Anyone has a problem here with what you're going to be? Okay, good. So let me just introduce the dynamics. We are going to have a conversation. I'm going to introduce the topic, and then I'm going to formulate some questions to the panelists, and I will encourage all of you to be part of the discussion. After all, we are having this for your benefit, and I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions. So during the last 2 years, the desperate situation of Syrian refugees fleeing a brutal armed conflict has received extensive media attention, while other large refugee populations displaced for several years, if not decades, are often neglected. Every year, new conflicts and predicaments force more people to leave their countries and become displaced refugees. Some become stateless and paranoid. Today, we are witnessing a global refugee crisis with an estimate of 21 million souls forced to leave their homelands and territories. These are individuals fleeing armed conflict, human rights violations, and persecution. The distressing estimates increase on a daily basis, with millions more suffering unbearable despair that forces them to flee from countries like Syria, Iraq, Burundi, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, many countries across Central America, just to name a few. According to the UNHCR, the 2015 report on global trends and forced displacement, the majority of refugees are hosted in low and middle-income countries, with 1/4 living in least developed countries. This is about 4.2 million people. By the end of the year 2015, Jordan became host to the largest refugee population in the world, followed by Turkey, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Many of the world's wealthiest nations host the fewest amount of refugees. For instance, at the end of 2015, the total refugee and asylum-seeking population in Australia was 58,000 compared to 740,000 refugees and asylum seekers in Ethiopia. By the year 2016, this year, the U.S. counts with 84,995 refugees from 79 countries, and it is expected to have 110,000 refugees in fiscal year 2017. What is more, some wealthy nations prefer to send aid money to keep people out of their own countries, a means of holding the world at arm's length. Regardless, refugees are vulnerable people who find themselves enduring dehumanizing conditions. Many escape conflict only to die of pneumonia, diarrhea, and a variety of illnesses. They escape bullets and missiles, but become victims of human trafficking. According to Amnesty International, around 30 countries currently run some kind of refugee resettlement program, and the number of places offered annually falls short of the needs identified by the UNHCR. To make a significant impact on the crisis, there is a need for more money for aid agencies and a need to increase the number of countries resettling refugees. Human rights and relief organizations agree that quote, "The cause of failing to act is that we condemn millions to endure lives of unrelenting misery. The most vulnerable will not survive. Quietly, in their thousands, vulnerable refugees trapped in unsustainable situations will die because they cannot get the help they need. They will die because some countries took in just a few hundred, leaving others with a million." So with that introduction, let me just turn to our panelists. Why are countries not sharing responsibility to host refugees? Do they have any national security concerns? Do they have any legal grounds? Is this a situation of xenophobic anti-migration that is driven by fear and concern about maybe security? Who wants to go first? Good.
I think it's all of the above. If you look at the United States' experience, I think their experience is a bit different than maybe people on the continent. I know it's hard to believe, especially after the amount of wars that the United States has been in, but we are still very much an isolationist country. If you hearken back to the Second World War and the horrific things that were going on the continent when the Nazis took power in Germany in 1933, for the next 8 years, even up after Germany had attacked Poland, the United States continuously, the people of the United States continuously resisted intervention in the Second World War. And it was only until Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, that pivoted, turned, changed, and then the United States jumped in with both feet. So there is, because of maybe just history, maybe because of the geography, there is an isolationist policy in the United States that is not necessarily true of folks on the continent. One thing I will say that many countries on the continent have absorbed quite a few refugees. I think that at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, but I think that Germany has about 600,000 refugees from the Syrian crisis. Some of these other countries are resisting it because of security reasons. Obviously, a series of attacks that have taken place on the continent have made people quite cautious. We are now in an area of what we call in the military sphere asymmetrical warfare, where it's not like the old days where the troops lined up across a dividing line and fought each other. We now have a fight of a traditional army against individuals who will fight and retreat to fight another day and then take their battles to other locales, be it Paris, be it London, be it the United States, New York, or whatever. And that changed the psychology of the entire security system. And I will tell you frankly, in the United States, it's got the United States people quite confused as to how to handle that type of terrorist attack, especially in the United States when, frankly, you have folks that are in the security arena that say that an attack in the United States is inevitable. It's just a matter of when. And I do think you cannot overlook one very fundamental flaw in all of us, which is pure selfishness. And the selfishness when you just don't identify with individuals who are in distress. And this is not the first situation in your recent memory. What were you folks doing? Do you remember what you were doing in 1994? In the beginning of the summer of 1994, over the course of about the entire year, say from June 1994 to the end of the year, think back and where were you? School, vacation, I'm sure August, where you were on holiday. Well, in that 6-month period of time, in Rwanda, almost 1 million people were killed. 1 million. And the world stood by and did nothing. In my career with the United Nations, that was the most serious blemish on anything and everything that we ever did. And who was responsible? Nobody was responsible, and we were all responsible. We stood by and did nothing and thought of 55 different excuses why we shouldn't do something, we shouldn't intervene, when frankly, dropping a couple of regiments and NATO troops on the ground would have stopped that killing forthwith. So I think it's a melange of issues, and I think it really depends where we look at it. The United States is interested in not getting involved. Our is quite different than folks that are on the continent that believe that they're besieged with all of these refugees. But I think the one common thing we have among all of us throughout the world is selfishness, and that's something that we have to examine ourselves about.
Hi everybody, thanks for being here with us today. As Professor Nagle mentioned, I'm from Germany, and we have a lot of refugees in our country. But still, I think the German population in general is very open to refugees. And as I heard, you're all journalists, and I have to really stand up for the German media when it comes to the refugee crisis. Because what happened when we had all these refugees coming into Germany or into Europe in general from different countries is that the media published very openly about what happened to these people and tried very hard to tell their story. But that comes with a great responsibility because these stories are tragic and they come with personal issues and with personal rights of the refugees. To name an example, almost a year ago, there was a photo published in a German newspaper, and it went, I believe, almost around the world. Maybe you even know that picture. It was a picture of a 3-year-old boy face down at the Turkish border at the beach, dead because he drowned. Sometimes pictures speak louder than words, and that was really a wake-up call in my country. And I can just encourage you to talk about issues like that, because you're the voice of the people, and you're the binding piece between legal issues and the public. Because oftentimes the legal issues behind such things as refugee crisis are so complex and difficult that we need people who can almost translate these issues into words that the general public will understand and will get an idea of what's going on. And you guys are doing a great job, and it's a great responsibility, but you're also the voice of change, so I can just encourage you to tell people's stories.
Professor Nagle, thank you very much for having me. I want to welcome you guys to Stetson University. اللي بيحكوا عربي منكم أهلا وسهلا فيكم بجامعة ستاتسون. شرفتوني. Professor Nagle, I deal with this every day. I am seeing a lot of refugees and possible asylum applicants from the Middle East. The problem is that's actually backlogging the service here in the United States. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services for about 3 years now. We're waiting for interviews when the interviews used to take about 5 months. And you asked the question of why are people or countries being protectionist, and I
share responsibility.
Not sharing responsibility, and honestly, I know everybody heard about the election and what just happened last week, and I shrug it off to a struggle between two forces. I think the populist forces in the world and the most progressive forces in the world are really fighting right now. I don't want to label everyone who's in one group a certain way, but we're becoming, like Mr. Kehoe said, we're becoming more a protectionist. The problem is, I was in Lebanon last month. I think we're number 4 or 5 in people that in the number of refugees that we have. We have more than 2.5 million refugees in Lebanon at this point. In a population of 3.5 million. so you guys can think about the numbers.
Let me just, Lebanon has 1.5 million, and in Lebanon, nearly 1 in 5 individuals is a refugee.
Exactly, and that's the 2.5 million number actually also has the Palestinian brothers and sisters
Yes.
who are in Lebanon, whom we've had since 1948. The problem with Lebanon is that in a lot of ways it's a failing state. The politics does not work. The protections of refugees are not being sometimes upheld, and it's a country that cannot afford actually having over 2.5 million refugees. I do believe that it's not xenophobia, that the United States actually wants to stop refugees. And there is one number that I read yesterday. There's about 14 million refugees in the world right now. I think that number is up to 21 million through some estimates. Who knows how many refugees we take in the United States? Professor Nagle said 117,000 or something like that
For the State Department,
for 2017. This year we're 85,000 out of 14 million. I don't think that number is high enough. I really don't. And I've been interviewed before about the refugee crisis. We did have, and unfortunately I'm going to say this, and not a lot of people might like it, but in Florida we did have a bill that was supposed to stop refugees from coming to the state of Florida. And I was interviewed about this before. What do these people have? If you stay there, I was interned to this place before as a kid when there was civil war in Lebanon, and I grew up with bombs and people dying in front of me, and it scars you for life. So staying there is not an option, and also leaving to a different country is not an option. So what do? You stay there for that? I really don't think so, and I think we do need to increase our numbers and open our borders for these people who really need our help.
Well, thank you. So what we see now is seems to be an agreement that countries are really not sharing their responsibility to host refugees. It seems that Greg thinks that there is a little bit of xenophobic attitude in there, anti-immigration attitude, security reasons, concerns, so you mentioned pretty much the role of the media. And someone had even said that the problem in many countries is the lack of proper information, the lack of proper unbiased information. So yes, you all have a very important role in your hands to try to inform the people, not just in your own country, but around the world of what's going on with the refugee crisis and whether or not all countries have a duty to share that responsibility. So let me just go to the second question. Will you offer some criteria or formula to countries so that they will have a basis by which to assess their fair share and see what the fair share of others look like? And let me just give you the present situation. Australia, and we all have seen the situation in which a lot of the refugees are placed in Australia. They are put in pretty much like jails. This last week, I think it was Friday or Saturday, the government of the United States, through John Kerry, entered into an agreement with Australia that we will take some of the refugees here to the United States. Australia is a big country, and they have very few refugees that have been treated like prisoners. So, what will be fair for the small countries like Lebanon lot of resources. Jordan had to ask for help to the international community in 2015. I was in Jordan in November of 2015, and the amount of refugees was just unbearable. There were 5 million refugees, while here in the United States we have so few, and many in the EU also have so few. What formula should we have in place so that the sharing is given? Do we